sit and hang.
So, just an FYI, it's Radio Free Pensacola, Garage 71, my show's the AV Radio. This is two competing radio stations working together.
I love
that
it.
have come in unison.
I love it.
To get to talk to you, so
That's wonderful.
collaborative stuff all over the
That's
place.
good.
So, the first thing I was wondering about with your new album, there's a couple songs, 1933, the ones where the survival mode on what we're dealing with. But a lot of your songs actually are positive and hopeful, being nice, this, that, and the other. Does that come from actually like a real honest state of hope? Or is it kind of like a state of exhaustion where we really need to do something?
I think it's more, I think that within myself, my balance between optimism and pessimism isn't accurately reflected by the album, if you see what I mean. I'm actually, this album was written from quite a pessimistic place. However, I feel like if I'm going to put the effort into writing a set of words, sing them an album, and sing them every night all around the world, I don't really see the point in focusing on the negatives all that much, because we have to do something about what's going on in the world. And if, to the extent that songwriting is normative and has the ability to change things, I mean, and I don't mean this to sort of like criticize anybody else, because I listen to plenty of extremely depressing music and that's fine. But for myself, I just sort of feel like if I'm going to stand up on that stage tonight in front of 2,000 people or whatever, I'd like to sort of leave behind some kind of suggestion, some sort of vibe that there is something that we can do, because there's always something we can do. So, like I say, I think that actually, on a personal level, I'm not particularly optimistic right now, but if I'm going to put out a record, I would prefer for it to be an optimistic one.
I like that. You got any follow-up?
That's true. Basically, well, as I listened to the album several times, I just thought, especially when we got to things like Brave Face and the 21st Century Survival Blues, my first thought was, this is sort of like a survival guide to the apocalypse for those people.
Kind of. I mean, the other thing to be said about those two songs, and indeed the large chunk of the record, is the big difference in my personal life at the moment. The last two records I've put out could be summed up as being about romantic ineptitude and about just sort of being crap at relationships. And I am now happily settled. And it's kind of a new thing for me to be able to write love songs that are happy all the way through, that don't have like a horrible twist in the tail. I've had people over the years come up to me and say, and it's a wonderful thing for people to say, and I'm hugely grateful for it, but they say, we had one of your songs played at our wedding, and I say, that's amazing, and then internally I think, which one? Oh my God, but then the thing is that, what actually comes out of that is the fact that songs are about whatever anybody chooses for them to be about. I firmly don't believe in telling people what songs are about. I think that that's false. I think that interpretation is the interesting part of art. So if somebody's heard a song and they've interpreted it as being a positive thing for them, they're correct in that. I'm not trying to overdo that, but just on a personal level, I'm a bit kind of like, well, that one was written when I was crying my eyes out at Sydney Airport, and that one, do you know what I mean? Sort of. Whereas on the new record, I mean, There She Is, the most obvious example, Going Nowhere as well. And indeed those two, and I mean, I feel like my favourite bits on the record are the bits where there's something of an achieved synthesis between kind of positive romantic songs and thinking about what's the world falling apart, or whatever, so, and Brave Face and 21st Century definitely fall under that rubric.
Well, the album is tremendously transformative when you listen to it and you compare it to some of the previous work. And Timo and I were talking earlier about favorite songs and favorite lyrics, and there was one, there's always an iconic lyric in every album. And today we were talking and we kind of settled on one, In There Like Swimwear.
Oh, yeah, right. So, In There Like Swimwear is an English expression that in particular is used by my buddy Craig. And Craig is a very good friend of mine, and Craig was a very good set of ears and shoulders, if you know what I mean, when I was in a slightly rocky patch in a relationship. In my relationship, full stop. There was but one in my life these days. And so it's kind of a bit of a nod to him putting it in there, and it's a fun expression. I hadn't realised how sort of alien that expression is to a lot of people on this side of the Atlantic. When the record came out, I mean, I was inundated by people asking me what on earth does In There Like Swimwear mean, and I was gonna sort of like explain on Twitter, and then And then people started having theories about it, and I thought it was funnier to just kind of let it ride. I mean, it's quite an intimate, not particularly sort of pleasant image in its way. It's, you know, when you get your swimwear caught up inside.
I was comparing that to sand in the gears and not coming up with a good
No,
visual.
I mean, you're not wrong. But no, I mean, you know, it doesn't just mean that. It means very close, essentially.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, little different direction here. One thing that I've always really enjoyed about you personally, besides just your music, is you have always been so interpersonal with your fans, as far as quiet shows afterwards here, just sitting and talking to people, and then being really responsive. You have gained a lot more fandom in the U.S. I first saw you open up for Dropkick, then I saw you at the Masquerade, now you're at the Tabernacle, where you originally opened up. What does this relationship now that you have look like when you gain this many fans?
Well, okay, I'm going to answer the question in a slightly roundabout way, but like, essentially, I've never been a huge fan of the word fan, which is a strange sentence now that I say it out loud. But like, it's, you know, my formative experiences were on the hardcore and punk scenes in the UK, and I'll never forget this. I went to see my first hardcore show was at the Highbury Garage in December 1997. And I went to see Agnostic Front, and there was some local bands supporting and stuff. And what I remember is that when the first band finished, they just sort of packed up and climbed over the front of the stage, and the second band climbed out of the audience. And it was this really visual demonstration of the fact that, to me, punk rock, definitely, and maybe music generally, is supposed to be a conversation. You know, it's not supposed to be a monologue delivered by one sort of class of people to another. You know what I mean? And there's something about that whole rock and roll thing of, like, you know, guys with feather boas showing up in limos and then sort of like deigning to give some of their time to the proles for 2 hours before they jet off in their limos again. There's something about that that's just kind of, not only is it kind of gross to me, it's kind of a waste of time. I don't really care. And whereas I've always found that, in my experience of punk rock, has been the idea that it's a conversation between a community of equals, and that, you know, when I'm on stage, it's my go. I have my time, but then the minute I'm off stage, then that my go has finished, and now I'm just one of the crowd, same as anybody else. And so all of that has led me throughout my career to try really hard not to build any kind of barriers between me and my audience. Having said all of that, obviously there are realistic, practical considerations, which is that when you're playing to a show of 100 people, you can hang out and say hi to everybody, and you can sit at the bar. Also, I might add, when you're in your 20s, you can sit at the bar and your voice will be fine the next day, and you can drink as much as you like, and everything's fine. You know, as time goes by, as things get bigger in my career, as you know, things get really on the up for me over here, which is really lovely. I mean, we're reaching points that I passed in the UK some time ago, but it's great. I'm very happy about that. I can't hang out and say hi to every single person who came to the show, simply because there is a limit to my energy, and indeed, as I get older, there's a limit to my voice. I have to really take care of my voice, and actually talking in the cold on a street corner for 2 hours after a show really slays my voice a lot more than actually doing shows does. So there is obviously a degree of separation that comes in, but I think that you can maintain the philosophy that underpins it, or at least I feel like I have done successfully. You know, and I like to think that the people who get into my music and sort of get to know what it's about understand this mindset of mine. I like to think that.
A quick follow-up to that, which is just going to be a really short answer, because I know we're short on time.
We can chat.
A couple years ago when you played, your back was having problems. Is that doing better?
It is. You know, I have unlocked the key to that, which is planking. You know what I mean by planking? You just get down and do that kind of stuff. I do 5-minute planks every day, which is murderously hard to do, but it has sorted my back out.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. I was just curious.
Thank you.
Glad to hear that. Yeah, I heard that last night's set list included 7 tracks off the new album.
Yeah.
How's it being received?
Generally pretty well. I mean, it's funny, like, when you put out a new record, and this is my 7th record, so I have some experience in this game now. You know, there's a degree of relief, because there's a whole sort of, like, there's a time delay built into the music industry. You know, we finished mixing the record in January, it didn't come out until May because there's promo to do and all the rest of it. So some of it's relief, some of it's kind of pride, and quite a lot of it's nerves. It's just like, holy cow, is this going to be the one where people go boo and stop going to shows or whatever, you know what I mean? So yeah, there's a mixture of emotions, but obviously at this juncture, there's no way that a song of a record that's been out for like a month is going to connect in the way that a song that's been out and been in people's stereos and indeed sort of affections for 8 years or whatever. But then having said that, I mean, one of the biggest songs on the set is Get Better, which was on the previous record, so that's cool. And it's really nice, like, I feel like the new songs are bedding in. You know, some of them have been out longer than others. 1933 is pretty established in the set these days because it was the first song we released in the record. We released it in like February, so that's had more time. But it's really fun. Like, I'm getting people requesting new songs. I'm getting people who have got some lyrics tattooed, that kind of thing. It feels like they're becoming part of the canon, which is great.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask one thing that I heard a little bit as I was listening, especially in tunes like Get It Right. Is there some sort of a spiritual sea change kind of taking place? I heard several religious references.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite publicly atheist in my approach to the world. But I mean, the thing about that is, I mean, first of all, I'm completely fine and endlessly respectful of religion and religious people as long as they leave me out of it. Yeah. But also, like, I mean, my take on it, and part of the reason I wrote that song, Glory Hallelujah, is that I'm so bored of the kind of po-faced, angry approach that a lot of the kind of pro-atheists take in public. For me, it's a joyous thing to think that the world is as it is, or at least it's at the very least it's a call to action. Do you know what I mean? It's like, get on with it. Yeah. This is it. You know, and also, you know, I've always been bothered by the idea of people going on about the supernatural, because I think the natural world is super in and of itself. I really don't think that in a way, I feel like people sort of positing other worlds and all that kind of thing haven't spent enough time concentrating on what we know about this one. I mean, have you read about string theory? It's insane. Like, you know, or indeed about the finer aspects of biology or whatever. There's so much wonder and joy and excitement in the world as it is. I mean, having, you know, with all of that in mind, I was raised in a religious household. My grandfather was a priest. My mother is very religious. She's not a fan of the song Glory Hallelujah, and that's fine. But you know, I think that should I ever have children, I will raise them reading the Bible, because I don't think it's possible to interpret any of Western culture of the past 2,000 years without its solid foundation in the knowledge of Christianity, because that's what our culture has been for 2,000 years. Similarly, the language of the St. James version, authorized version of the Bible, is some of the most beautiful poetry there is, and if there are moments when that kind of stuff starts creeping into what I do, then that's fine.
No, as I mentioned earlier, I just thought it was such a transformative album in the things that you were saying and what was going on.
Well, I'm definitely turning into a bit of a hippie in my old age. I think that's a fair cop. I mean, but it's funny. I think there's a fair amount of stuff on this record that I'm saying, and indeed sounds that I'm making, that I probably wouldn't have allowed myself to say or do 10 years ago, shall we say. There's a degree. I mean, the title of the record comes from a poem by Clive James, who is one of my favourite writers, who is terminally ill, which is very sad, and I regard him as one of the most sort of emotionally and intellectually wise people I've ever come across in my life. And for him at the end of his life to say, I should have been more kind, it is my fate to find this out but find it out too late, that's heavy, you know. And it's just like, and it's funny because one of the reactions I've had to the record generally from younger people is just kind of like, you know, this is just crap, you know, need kindness, you know, we need to stand barricades and fight and blah blah blah. And I sit here, I mean, I'm 36, I'm not super old, but within the context of the industry that I work in, I'm definitely on the upper end of the demographic these days. And I kind of look at these kids and I'm like, man, cool, be an angry punk when you're in your early 20s, but you'll learn after a time that actually, you know, it does make a difference trying to be considerate in your arguments, and it is important.
This question just popped up to my head with that. A lot of people always ask, you know, what do you consider to be punk? And I don't want to ask you what you consider to be punk. What I actually want to ask is, what do you think the difference is from 20-year-old Frank to Frank now on what you believe punk is?
Well, 16 years. I mean, I don't know. Enough time and effort has been wasted arguing about what punk is and isn't that I just can't be asked to contribute further. And I'm very settled in my life now, in the sense that my understanding of what punk is and the role that it's played in my life is settled, and it's something that I'm happy with. What other people think about that, I couldn't give two shits. Like it's
I will gladly accept
do you
that
know what I
answer.
mean? Like, and there are endless kids out there who want to sort of quibble with whether or not what I do is punk, or whether I'm allowed to be a punk or be mentioned in the same way as the word punk. And like some of these kids, I've been, this summer is my 20th anniversary of being on the road. Some of these kids weren't even born when I started touring, and why on earth I should pay attention to their opinions on that subject strikes me as not yet explained to me. Like I say, I grew up listening to punk records, and the ethics that I learned in so doing still govern everything I do. I think that I like to think that I'm wiser. I mean, I actually mentioned this in lyrics to an older song, but like, there's a funny thing that some people don't. There's an odd conservatism in punk in places where people don't want things to change, and it's kind of like, well, okay, that's not what punk was supposed to be in my understanding of it. But also the idea that I would go and just spend 20 bloody years on tour and come back and not have learned anything, because changing is another word for growth, is another word for becoming wiser and learning about the world. So the difference between me and when I was 20 is that I know an awful lot more about the world, and also really, really importantly, I've also learned how little I know. Do you know what I mean? To my mind, part of the process of aging, and to the degree I possess any wisdom at all, is the realization of how little you understand and how little you will ever understand about the world, you know? And it's one of the facets of being an adolescent that you think you know everything. I think that like, the older you get, the further away from that statement you get, you know what I mean? And like, I was sure I knew how to solve the world's problems when I was 16, and I'm thankfully have no idea now.
Yeah, I was going to say, considering the notion of punk and your support of it, for one thing, 2 years of festivals at the Roundhouse.
Yeah.
Are you doing a third one next year?
We are. It's going to be in a different place.
Oh,
I can't tell you where.
All right.
But it'll be different. It'll be the same principle, the same idea, and I'm really proud of that festival. I really feel like it's a cool thing. You know what that festival is? That festival is me putting my money where my mouth is in a way that I'm really proud of, in the sense that like, it's not just about the fact that, I want to support new bands, and we do loads of outreach stuff to get kids working in the industry. We had people shadowing all of my crew this year, and we had sort of lessons and groups about how to, do what we do, how to demystify that and all the rest of it. But it's like, unlike quite a lot of that kind of stuff, we're not state funded in any way. I lose money putting on the festival, and it's my way of sort of going, these are my values and the things I believe in, and I'm gonna pay for it to happen. And I'm really proud of that, I think it's really cool to be able to hold my head in public and kind of go, yeah, I don't just type this stuff in 140 characters, I believe it and I do it.
Awesome. My wife has already told me that she's not going to watch another one pass by.
Okay.
So we're going next
Well,
year.
all I can say is that it will be easier for you to get to.
We'll leave it at that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. I'll insert some dramatic music right there. So, and thinking about the things that you have supported so publicly, also Safe Gigs for Women is something that I've seen you as quite a vocal supporter of.
Yeah.
Had Melinda Kelly on my show a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, awesome. She's wonderful.
And she, of course, she said a lot of great things about you. And we talked for about 30 minutes about Safe Gigs for Women and the fact that there are certain efforts that are happening here in the States now.
Yeah. Well, we've got, actually tonight we have Mabel Syndrome coming down who do a similar thing. I mean, it's I think it's easier for Safe Gigs for Women to be a national organisation in a small country. Do you know what I mean? It's like you can get to anywhere in the UK in a day quite happily, and probably back again. So it's more difficult to put together over here. I think Safe Gigs for Women are wonderful. I mean, they're really lovely people. In a way, it's kind of annoying that they have to exist, because really, you know what I mean?
No, yeah.
And like, I'm sure everything that Mel said is going to be much more valuable to this conversation than anything I would say, for several obvious reasons. But like, I mean, one of the things for me in terms of opening that subject up for conversation is that like I was naive and ignorant enough to kind of go, yeah, that kind of stuff's awful, but it doesn't happen at my shows. And of course it does, and it has, because there are shitty idiots everywhere in the world. And but that was my initial experience with Safe Gigs for Women, is Mel getting in touch, or in fact Tracy getting in touch and saying, that there had been an incident that had been reported at one of my shows, and I was furious. I couldn't have been more angry, because it just, and in a way, since that happened, I've been a lot more vocal on stage about what I want the atmosphere and the interpersonal relationships of my shows to be like, because I just sort of thought that was implied and obvious, and it turns out it wasn't. And even now, when I say all this stuff, like, still people behave like idiots some of the time. And I think it's important to say that like human beings are flawed creatures, and that we're never, it's never going to be perfect on this level, but if we can change the culture that sort of tolerates one type of bad behavior more than others, then I think that that's a positive step.
I agree.
I completely agree. Well said. Let's turn this interview a little bit and a nice, simple, easy question.
Okay.
We
I'll
know
probably have a really long answer as well.
that's awesome.
I talk endlessly.
We all know Frank, very, very hard-working musician, always playing more music. But what the hell does Frank do to relax?
Well, okay. I mean, as a preface to that question, I told you I'd give you a long answer. As
Nice.
a preface to my answer in that, it's really funny. We fooled everybody this year by announcing the world tour in one go, and lots of people then didn't notice the gaps. We have 3 members of my touring family now have children. I have a partner. I have a cat. And I guess all of this, what I'm trying to say is that we all have reasons to go home now, which we never did in our 20s. I'm 36. I'm the youngest guy on the crew. And like we did our time, man. I think the longest I ever went without going home was 21 months, and that's ridiculous. I spent like 9 years without even having without having a place to live that was mine. I just crashed on people's sofas or in the office at my mum's house or whatever. So, whereas now, and it's funny because for a long time I was almost like nervous about changing that, as if it would be some kind of like defeat or sellout in some way to like live somewhere. And again, this is, the answer difference between 20-year-old me and me now. It's like I've realized that that's idiotic thinking like that. But yeah, so we all have reasons to go home now. So we do, and like we generally don't do more than about 4 weeks on the road without going home for about 2 weeks. So I get more time at home now. And I live in a nice house with my partner and my cat. I hang out with my cat and my partner. I'm a member of my local historical society. I'm really obsessed with London history in particular, is my big thing as I get older. I'm from a London family. I wasn't raised in London, but I moved to London as soon as humanly possible. Actually, 20 minutes after I finished school. I finished school, went home, threw some t-shirts in a bag and got on a train. My mum was pissed. I love London. I adore London. It's in my bones and it's in my blood. And so I do a lot of walking around the city, looking at old stuff.
So during your downtime, the historian in you might be able to recommend a book or two?
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, if you want to know about London, you should read Peter Ackroyd. He's spent his whole life writing books about London. I'm in fact reading one of them right now. But Peter Ackroyd's biography of London is a wonderful book. Actually, we can, in terms of, I'll give you 2 more, if I may.
All right.
Both of which relate to the new album. My God, he said, bring it back around.
You're brilliant, Frank.
No, it's a fluke. It's all a fluke, every part of it. There's a book called Revolution 1989 by Victor Sebastian, which is a history of the fall of the Iron Curtain in 1989, which was one of the most profoundly moving books I've ever read. It really, I actually shed a tear a few occasions in it, and there's quite a lot of implicit imagery on Be More Kind, which is taken from that book, particularly the peace picnic on the Austro-Hungarian border in the summer of 1989, which was when the first the first holes in the fence got made in between the Soviet bloc and the free world. So that book, I mean, I kind of want to read it again. I devoured it in a very short period of time. I don't often read books twice because life is way too short, and I spend enough time waking up in the middle of the night panicking that I won't ever read all the books I want to read. And then one other, and this was a huge influence on the music of the album. There's a book by Simon Reynolds called "Rip It Up and Start It Again," which is a history of the post-punk musical movement. And my knowledge of, I sort of have ambitions towards like holistic musicology. And being a nerd and knowing everything about all music, I mean, it'll never happen. But like my knowledge had always slightly gone like 77 punk and then hardcore and then American indie and through the sort of Michael Azerrad era up until Nirvana. And I sort of wasn't all that knowledgeable about post-punk and what happened in the UK in that period of time. So I was reading that book and it was absolutely incredible read, and really like my sort of listening just went haywire around that period of time. And so then I was listening to like Human League, and I was listening to like Scritti Politti, and I was listening to Einstürzende Neubauten and stuff, and like just really, really sort of blew the doors off the limits of my music taste.
I just have to add a little PSA here. Any of my former students, any of my future students, anybody who's not one of my students, you heard it. Reading, important, awesome. Read as much as you can. I can't tell you guys that enough.
Yes, strong agree.
And my final question, is one that I've asked everybody who's graced my program. 3 bands you could not live without.
Oh, only 3. 3 bands I couldn't live without.
Well, I'll let you break the rule, but I think they'll come in here and start telling you it's time.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely couldn't live without the Weaker Thans. But I'm going to lump John K. Sampson in with that because he wrote it's the same thing. I mean, John's kind of a friend of mine these days, although I find it quite hard to just hang out with him socially because I think he's a genius and it's just a bit like, hello. But the Weaker Thans are at the top of the list, I would say. I would probably include Springsteen and the E Street Band on that, which is an obvious answer, but it's true. And also that gives you quite a varied catalogue to pick from. You know what I mean? You've got a lot of material to work with there. And then, I mean, can I pick 2 more?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
okay. I pick Black Flag because they still underpin so much of my understanding of music. And then I would also pick Leonard Cohen, who is Leonard Cohen's I'm fascinated by Leonard Cohen simply because as a songwriter, when I hear Bob Dylan, I go, that's incredible. And then I kind of go, yeah, I can see how he's doing that. And then I become actively inspired in the sense that I can think to myself, I'm going to try and write a song that sounds like whatever you want to pick, Submarine Homes of Blues, whatever. Whereas when I hear Leonard Cohen, it's like staring into the sun. It's just like, I can't even begin to imagine how any human came up with this, and I can't be influenced by it directly because it's terrifying and it's too good. Do you know what I mean? There's just something about him, his genius, to my mind, and I say this as a huge Dylan fan, and please never think I'm going to be some arsehole criticizing Dylan in 2018, but I think that Leonard Cohen is an infinitely superior songwriter, and I think that when I just listen, I mean, I don't think Dylan's ever touched anything like Famous Blue Raincoat or Chelsea Hotel or anything like that. I think that so Leonard Cohen, I feel like there is a lifetime more listening and understanding of Leonard Cohen's work that I have yet to do.
All right. My final question should be real quick, and I know you're going to give a long answer because you're like
yeah.
No, but this is actually a pretty easy one. Coming up in the next couple of years, what would your feelings be if asked back about coming back to the Salty Dog Cruise? Oh,
they'd be good and slightly watch that space. I'm not really supposed to say anything else about that yet.
You don't have to. But
the thing, no, it's funny.
I want to know your interest.
The thing is, I did the first 2, and then for various reasons, I haven't done one since. And it's funny because there's been this sort of vague theory going around that somehow I've fallen out with Foggy Molly or something like that. And it's important for me to state that couldn't be any further from the truth. I love those people to death with all my heart and always will. Among other things, I'm just extremely grateful for them because I feel like a big part of my career over here comes from touring with those guys. But I love them all these. It just hasn't worked out for a year or 2, but it will in the future. And the cruise is so much fun.
We both saw you the first 2 years.
Great. So. Well, you may see me again.
Sweet.
Awesome.
We definitely hope so.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, Frank.
Thank you, and thank you.
Really appreciate it.
That was fun. It was good. I told you I talked too much.